Hey guys, good morning. Hope you're safe and well wherever you are. Welcome to Skool Cornwall, and I couldn't quite get my words out then. Welcome to quite a chilly, cold Tuesday. It's pretty cold here in Cornwall, although we've seen a smattering of snow, not very much. A very, very light dusting. In fact, as I'm looking out into the field behind my house, there is no snow whatsoever, and much warmer than the rest of the country, which is perhaps good news for us in terms of being able to get to shops, but perhaps bad news for kids and childlike people who like to frolic and play in the snow, of which I am one. So we are hoping for a little bit more snow so that we can build a snowman. But this is not why you have tuned into Skool Cornwall today. Today we are going to be looking at specifically writing again, and a part of writing that I know well and know intimately, and that is beginning writing. I think that's perhaps the hardest thing to do, is to sit down with a pen or on your computer and start writing. I'm all right talking about writing, but when it comes to starting to write, I get a little nervous. Sometimes I have writer's block. And I reckon probably the same is true for you. When your teachers say, right, now you write a story, I wonder if you think, right, just before you're about to start, oh, I'm not sure where to begin. So this lesson is all about how to begin writing your story. And I'm hopeful that it will help you, but I'm also hopeful, rather selfishly, that it will help me, because I like to write. And I'm going through a bit of a writer's block at the moment, so planning this lesson yesterday gave me a bit of enthusiasm and encouragement. So we know that when we're writing, what we want the reader to do is to see it, feel it, hear it, but importantly, turn the page. And it's the last one that I'm interested in. So today's lesson is very much a big ideas lesson. And I'm going to be throwing some big questions, which I'd like you to have a go at answering. It might be you don't feel like answering them, but I'd like to have a go. And the first one is, what compels us to turn the page? What makes us want to turn the page? So if you can write that in the chat, that'd be great help. But equally, you might not want to, so that's fine too. So this lesson is all about how to begin writing and how to get that beginning of your story nailed. So what compels us to turn a page? So I'm an avid reader. I haven't always been an enthusiastic reader, but I am now, and I can be sure of that. But I always have a difficulty when I start reading a book. I don't know if you ever do this. You might pick up a book, you read the first chapter or the first page, you think, I'm not quite sure, and perhaps you give up reading that book. So today's lesson is all about how to make sure that your reader turns the page. Every time you pick up a book and you start reading a story, you are effectively walking into an unknown place. And I want to use that metaphor, walking, because I think that's how it works a lot of the time. When we start reading, if a writer's good enough, they'll make us feel like we are walking through or living through or experiencing what's happening on that page. And reading through the page, which is an idea that I was thinking about last night, is very much how I want you to think about what your writing should do. It should enable your reader to read through the page. So as we begin reading, forgive me, the technology isn't about to break. We begin with a blank screen. There's my blank screen. And I'm back again. And if your writer isn't making the words work, that is all you're going to see. You won't particularly imagine anything. So how do you, as a reader, imagine a story? You're reading these lines on a page. How do you imagine them? What do you think a good writer will need to do to make you imagine? And that's a pretty big question, and I think really worth spending a bit of time on. What does a great writer, and by a great writer, I mean you, what do you need to be doing to make sure that the readers don't just see a blank page? I mean, I'm sure you felt the same way. You pick up a book, you read the first page, and it doesn't do anything. In fact, what you really want a great story to do is to provide some light, some detail, something which you can follow. As a reader, we want to read through a story, we want to follow what is going on. Sometimes we might think lots of description. Exactly, Chloe. I mean, I was hoping somebody would say that. In many senses, I think you're right. We think that description is crucial, and it really is. There are ways of describing that help readers through the page, and there's also ways of describing that make sure readers only see that. And that's pretty interesting. I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking how interesting that was, that description is absolutely at the heart of what makes readers follow and read through the page. But sometimes description can be too much. Sometimes it can be too detailed. It can be, your story can be full of description. It can be, well, in this instance, too much description. This is a messy room, and it's difficult to know, what's going on. It's difficult to follow what's central in the picture. You can just about make out the boy, but there's so much going on in that description that actually, I think if that were a story, the only thing that you'd see is that, and I think you'd stop reading it. And I've certainly felt that way. Sometimes you have to power through that first page of description that is perhaps messy and too detailed to get to the real gem in a book. But today's lesson is all about how to write a great beginning, how to get the reader to read through the page and follow your ideas. And so this idea of the reader following a bit of information, something, a bit of light. And for me, I think that's really what will get us to read on as readers, that small bit of information. So if you think about your most recent journey, did you remember everything? Or did you remember, perhaps you were in a car? Might have been a long time since you've been in a car, but what do you remember from that journey? Do you remember everything, every blade of grass, every pebble on the ground? Do you remember the colour of the sky? Or do you remember a hill? Do you remember a bird flying? Do you remember seeing a pylon? These features don't make up the whole picture, but if you were describing this room, for instance, if you were to describe every single element of that picture, it would be too much. So today's lesson is about reading through the page, and to do that well, what we need to do is give the reader a bit of information. You have to guide the reader through the room. You have to guide them through the room. And if you're going to guide them through the room here, will it be just too detailed and too confusing? I think it probably will be. So we're going to look at some examples of the beginnings of stories and look at how they captivate the reader. All of these books that we're going to look at, the beginnings of these books, are very famous, and they're also set texts that many of you might study at GCSE at school. Of Mice and Men, Lord of the Flies, and Animal Farm. And I'm sure you're familiar with these stories, but the beginnings are really interesting, and they reveal quite a lot. So we're going to have a look at an example from Of Mice and Men. And what I'd like you to do, and I'm just going to introduce a term to you, what I'd like you to do is think of the term landmark as a piece of information. So like the candle, for instance, is a landmark. Or if we're looking at this messy room, you could say that the cello in the corner was a landmark. Or the magnet on the left-hand side of the picture. These are landmarks. So as I read this story, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write those landmarks in the comments. So when they appear, note them down, okay? And again, just think about what's luring you in as a reader. So let's begin Of Mice and Men. Note those landmarks down in the chat. A few miles south of Soledad, the Salinas River drops in close to the hillside bank and runs deep and green. The water is warm too, for it has slipped twinkling over the yellow sands in the sunlight before reaching the narrow pool. On one side of the river, the golden foothill slopes curve up to the strong and rocky Gabilan Mountains, but on the valley side, the water is lined with trees, willows fresh and green with every spring, carrying in their lower leaf junctures the debris of the winter's flooding, and sycamores with mottled, white, recumbent limbs and branches that arch over the pool. On the sandy bank, under the trees, the leaves lie deep and so crisp that a lizard makes a great skittering if he runs among them. Rabbits come out of the brush to sit on the sand in the evening, and the damp flats are covered with the night tracks of coons and with the spread pads of dogs from the ranches and with the split wedge tracks of deer that come to drink in the dark. It's a very beautiful description. And there are aspects of it that I think really are wonderful and almost poetic. That line at the end, the deer that come to drink in the dark. It's very beautiful, that amazing alliteration. What landmarks can you see in the beginning of Mice and Men? At the beginning of your story, you're going to need landmarks. You're going to need points of reference. So here, Chloe, thank you. We've got the Salinas River, good. The Gabilan Mountains, and the trees, good. And I think that's a lot of detail, actually. I really love this beginning of Mice and Men, and I've read it many times, but I'm not so sure it's a great beginning. I mean, it's beautiful, lots of beautiful description, but having taught this book before, I don't know if it's the thing that makes us turn the page the most. I think our understanding of what's going to come later perhaps is what makes us turn the page. Okay, so what about the next text? Now this is the beginning of Lord of the Flies. And actually just before I talk about that, in Of Mice and Men, in the beginning, we've got a bit of movement, and movement is important. It's actually vital, and I'll come to that in just a bit. But we have the rabbits that come to drink, in the rabbits and the deer, and also the lizard. So we've got this detail of the mountains and the river that's running here, and then we've got the rabbits that come out at night, and we've got the deer that come out at night, and the lizard that makes a great skittering sound as he runs over the leaves. So movement is vital. I think, and I don't know if you think, but I think there's a lot of detail in that beginning which might threaten the reader's ability to read through it, to follow what's going on. Let's have a look at Lord of the Flies and see if you can notice any landmarks here. There are fewer, certainly. Why only these? So this is the beginning of Lord of the Flies. Note down the landmarks in the beginning. The boy with fair hair lowered himself down the last few feet of rock and began to pick his way towards the lagoon. Though he had taken off his school sweater and trailed it now from one hand, his grey shirt stuck to him and his hair was plastered to his forehead. All round him, the long scar smashed into the jungle was a bath of heat. He was clambering heavily among the creepers and broken trunks when a bird, a vision of red and yellow, flashed upwards with a witch-like cry, and this cry was echoed by another. Where are the landmarks there? Where are they? And also have a think, where is their movement? So the beginnings of stories, they have this essential orientation, you can call it. Writers, you, are trying to lure the reader in, and in this story we've got some landmarks at the beginning, and they are, thanks Chloe, we've got the lagoon, we've got the broken trunks of the trees, the scar, and we've also got some movement too. So we've got the, well, let's just have a look. These are the landmarks we've got. So we've got the lagoon, great, and we've got the jungle, we've got the creepers, and we've got those broken trunks. So these are the features of the beginning of the story. Lord of the Flies is set on a desert island, and I imagine it to look very, very beautiful. But here the writer's not describing every feature of the beginning. He's describing certain elements of it, very much like the way a little detail shows us the way, just like this candle, a little detail. But both in Of Mice and Men and also in Lord of the Flies, they're using some movement. And if you look again at the Lord of the Flies beginning, we have some movement. So we've got the boy lowering himself. So something is happening on the page, and that's good. When something is happening, when there's a verb, we too move with it. If it's just description, I don't think we move with it. What else have we got? We've also got, so he's taken off his sweater and he's trailing it now from one hand. So the beginning of this story, there's not an enormous detail about the place. There's not a great detail about his movement, but just enough for us to follow through the page. It's a bit like breadcrumbs. You might have an amazing idea for a story, but if you give everything away at the beginning, one, you're going to stop the reader from imagining, from following the story, and two, you will there'll be nothing else to sort of explain. Now, reading is magic as far as I can work out, and I think writing is too. And when you write, readers read through the page, as I've said quite a few times, but I want you to think a bit like you're creating a 3D picture. And we can see in this image of Lord of the Flies something in the foreground, something close up, whether the close up is the boy trailing his shirt, something in the distance. Have a look. something in the distance. In the distance, we've got the creepers, or even we have the jungle itself, the lagoon, and then we have something close by. And I imagine this witch-like cry of the bird is something that happens close by. So this image isn't just an image, but rather it's like a video, it's like a film, and things are moving. Not many. A couple of things are moving. I wonder, which do you think is better? Do you think Of Mice and Men is better, or do you think Lord of the Flies is better? And it's okay, I think, it's okay to make that judgment call. Which has the better beginning? What do you think? These writers are attempting to make their story three-dimensional. Which do you think is better? Okay, so now we're going to move on to another beginning, and this is the beginning of Animal Farm, and I think this is wicked. I think it's fantastic. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen house for the night. Again, where are the landmarks? But where is the movement? It's all about getting the reader to visualise this sort of 3D environment and follow the action. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen house for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut the potholes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a last glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way up to bed, where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. So where are the landmarks? Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm, well, there's clearly one, had locked the hen house for the night, but was too drunk to remember. So we've got the hen houses, that's a landmark. We've also got the potholes, which I can only assume are the holes of where the chicken hatches, perhaps the holes that they walk out of. I might be wrong, but I can only assume that. Thank you, Chloe. So we've got the lantern dancing from side to side, absolutely. And that's such a great technique because it's what we're following. You know, we can visualise that. We can follow that lantern moving from side to side. It's like we're being drawn into that story. And we know about the farm just from this small, this small amount of detail, that it's not perhaps a farm that is cared for particularly because Mr. Jones is drunk. We can see equally him kicking off his boots at the backyard. So at the back door rather, and then how he is pouring himself a last glass of beer. There are fewer landmarks, but there seems to be a lot of action and a lot of verbs that are going on, whether it's kicking off his shoes or pouring himself a glass of beer. So this story, I think, is better. I might get in trouble for saying that, but I think of the beginnings here, of these great works of art, Animal Farm is the best beginning. And I think it is because it's luring the reader straight into the story. And the verbs are telling us about the action that's happening. And the landmarks, we're less flooded with information. So I think these three examples are very useful in helping us begin our ideas. We have to lure the reader through the page. We have to guide them. If you guide the reader into the room and then you describe everything, then it's going to be overly descriptive and too difficult to read. How many times have we picked up a book and it's just been either too wordy or too detailed? We just thought, you know what, I can't read that. I mean, certainly for myself, I've experienced that too many times. But great writers show us a little bit of detail and they guide us through. They show the candle and they make us follow the detail through the page. I mean, in the Animal Farm, he's literally doing that. because he's using lanterns that help us guide us through the page. So in your stories, because of course this is all about you writing, it's all about you putting pen to paper. You're going to write in your school life. You're going to be assessed on your writing for GCSE. But I also want you to be a writer and to feel what being a writer is. And it's this communication with the reader. You're fishing, you're throwing some bait. If you put too much bait on your hook, you probably won't catch the fish. So it's just about putting enough detail in. Enough detail so readers get some idea of the landscape, something in front, something far away, some detail that shows the environment, but not too much. And also some verbs. In Of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck uses a lizard, a rabbit. He uses a deer. I think he uses them a little too late. They're very beautiful, it's very poetic, but it doesn't totally immerse the reader, I don't think. I think Lord of the Flies is better. We've got the boy with the shirt and some detail of the jungle, but not too much. But I think Animal Farm is brilliant because it uses really dynamic verbs and a bit of information that lead the reader through. And that lantern is such a great device, and it's what we are following as it swings through the page. Thinking about writing like this is what writers do, not just students that are taking their exams. It's what writers do, and I think there's every reason for you to do that. So have a look at the success criteria, and this is perhaps what I'd like you to incorporate in your stories. So on the right, we've got a basic writing frame. That's a kind of do this, do this, do this, do this. And there, in your beginning, you can write about something far away, something close by, the time of day, and the time of year. So you can write about those in sequence. First, something far away, then something close by, then time of year, then time of day, then time of day. I can't speak for some reason. And but I also like you to do what's on the left too. This is a bit of technical juggling, but one that will really improve your writing. Write from the third person perspective. Avoid first person perspective. Just for now, and try it. Also, have a character that's moving through the space. That happens in Lord of the Flies, and it also happens in Animal Farm. So, third person perspective and a character moving through a space. Landmarks. Between 4 and 7 landmarks in that beginning. Not too many. Not too few. So 4 is your minimum, and 4 would be enough for me, but no more than 7. If we describe too much, we will stifle the reader moving through the page. And let's have things moving in the frame. And between 4 and 7 ideas, whether they are, like in Animal Farm, the lantern, or the kicking off the boots, or the pouring the beer, or in Lord of the Flies, whether they are dragging the t-shirt, or lowering down, or the bird moving. It's really essential that you limit the beginning of your story. So 4 to 7 landmarks and 4 to 7 pieces of action. Okay, now what you can do is you can rewrite the beginning of these stories. It's a good technique, just steal what you've been shown, or steal from a story that you're reading and rewrite the beginning. Or be brave and just rewrite your own story. Remember that you want a reader to walk into this world that you're creating. And if you give them too much information, it will stifle and threaten them turning the page. It might make them shut the book. But if you use just a few landmarks and a few bits of action, your beginning will really invite readers in. And that is what we want to do as writers. We want readers. So invite them in by giving them a few pieces of information that they can follow. Be the candle in the dark. That's what every beginning hopes to be. You can, of course, feel free to send your stories in to lockdownlessons at skoolcornwall.com, and get in touch if you've got any questions. We are here through lockdown, and we're going to be teaching you everything we know. We're going to teach you about writing and about reading, about how to pass your exams, how to be a better writer, how to analyse language. And it's very much what we have done, Rebecca and I, for the past 15 years or so. And, we want to be that resource for you. So we're here. You can follow us on our Facebook page. You can follow us on what we're doing on our crowdfunder page. You can subscribe and like to Skool Cornwall and receive updates as to when our next lesson is going to be. And so you don't miss. You can turn your notifications on as well, actually. And of course, you can get in touch with us. So that's Facebook, that's YouTube, and that's crowdfunder. And also, we've got a Twitter, Skool Cornwall or Lockdown School at Twitter. So I hope you're safe and well. I hope you're managing to enjoy the sunshine or the snow, wherever you are. And take care, and we'll see you tomorrow. Okay, all the very best, and see you soon.